Hello and welcome to Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me on the show today is Debbie Ponte. She is the District 4 Supervisor for Calaveras County. Debbie, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's really good to have you on the show. And, one piece of news that I heard recently is that you've decided not to seek re-election in this next election cycle. And I know many people are probably disappointed by that because they've really liked having you as supervisor. So walk us through that decision.
Well, Joe, probably a decision came to me over the last several weeks. I really enjoy the job as supervisor, and my intent was to run again. But my husband and I lost our daughter earlier, and in 2015. And she was a big part of the campaign. In fact, she was my campaign manager. So it was a real difficult decision to come to. I just didn't feel I could put campaigning on already a full plate, and then just kind of reliving her death. And so I just figured maybe I should bow out at this time. A friend gave me really good advice saying, grieving takes a long time and don't rush it. And you can always come back. So I thought, I never thought of it that way. So who knows? But for now, I decided not to run. So my term will end December 31st of this year.
And our deepest condolences for the loss of your daughter. Grieving does take a long time. And during that period, once your term ends, what do you see for yourself over the next few years?
I don't know. My husband says, why don't you just kind of take a time out? I'm not one to kind of take a time out. So, I'm looking at all kinds of things. I think right now my door is open and just looking at opportunities. I've always wanted to run my own small business. I think of something, I love the community, being involved in the community in some fashion. So, right now I want to finish out my term and do the best job I can and concentrate my energies on that. And we'll see what happens next year.
And for those who don't know, you have done so many things in this county, including not just Board of Supervisors, but also the Government and Angels Camp and being very involved in running Foothill Village, and I mean, the list goes on and on. So you are someone who can do just about anything you put your hand to, it seems like.
Well, thank you for that, but I'm not quite sure. But anyway, when I get into something, I like to put my best foot forward and do the best I can. So for right now, it's concentrating on the job as supervisor. I still have 2 children in high school, so getting them through high school right now, and that's kind of my priority with being mom and finish my job as a supervisor.
So looking back over the years as supervisor, what are your kind of thoughts, your takeaway on the experience and working with other board members and the general county climate?
It's been a real good experience. I've enjoyed it. I've met lots of nice people. I have met people that, maybe aren't so nice, but certainly they're passionate about a certain issue. So, I always like to pride myself on being able to work with people, no matter, where they're coming from or what the issues may be, whether I agree with them or not, and seeing if we can find compromise. And that can be also frustrating at times, too. When you're in business, you can kind of, respond to something and get it done. In government, it just takes a little bit longer to get things done. And that can be frustrating at times.
And by a little bit longer, you mean a lot longer.
Yeah. And after being in it again, I was with the City of Angels for 8 years, and I realize, sometimes it's okay that it takes a while, because I think to engage the public in the process is important, and they need time in which to do so. And so you can't make that quick decision within a day or a week like you might in your own private business. So to engage the public, you need to have that period of time to encourage people to get involved and to comment on it or have an opinion on it, or if there's a new ordinance, there's a period of time in which people have a chance to comment on those things and be a part of it.
What are some things, looking back, that you take pride in that you or the board as a whole have worked on in the past few years?
I think a couple of things. I ran on the platform of, kind of bringing people together and working together and moving things forward. So with that, I think our board has worked well together on getting the general plan moving forward. Talk about taking a lot of time. Was hoping that would be done in a 4-year period. But, when you look at the general plan, it's a very complex issue. and lots of ideas in that. So, we have moved the general plan forward. I wish it was done, but at the same time, I'm really glad it isn't, because it needed to be reworked and it needed more public input. And that's really what our Planning Commission is doing right now, kind of taking apart piece by piece by piece and allowing more public input, their stamp on it, you might say, and then it'll come back before the board for some further public review.
And that's obviously ongoing. We may touch on that a little bit more. Back to the election, though, I wanted to ask you, I know that there are a few people who've put their names in the hat and they would like to run for your seat. Do you have a sense of any one of these candidates being a really good fit, even willing to endorse them, or are you kind of hesitant to do that?
I've never taken the position of endorsing anybody. I didn't seek endorsements when I ran. I wanted to be somewhat independent. I didn't want to give the perception of being obligated to one group or another. So that's my personal feel on it. And so endorsing anybody right now, no. Certainly probably support one person over the other a little bit more. But not for a public endorsement of saying, that's the person. So let voters make that decision.
Let me ask you this. What do you think was the key to your victory that these candidates might want to be thinking about during this race?
Well, I like to say I kind of ran an old-fashioned campaign. I did a lot of door-to-door. I met people in their homes, small group meetings in people's homes, a tremendous amount of door-to-door. And, you can't walk a community thinking, okay, I'm going to walk this street today and, I'll be done with 30 homes. You got to home 3, and next thing you knew, it's like, oh gosh, 6 hours into this. People wanted to talk, and I think at that point they felt like they had things to say, and maybe people weren't listening. They didn't know where their voice stood. So a lot of door-to-door campaigning, and I think, for me, that was very successful.
Oh, very, very good. And I know that your district is kind of split between two communities. So
it is.
The Copperopolis area and then up in Angels Camp. Did you find that was a difficult gap to bridge?
In some ways, but there are also a lot of commonalities. I mean, and don't forget Vallecito.
I can't believe my hometown.
Vallecito's on the upper end of District 4. So, between Vallecito and then Angels Camp, and then you have what I call the 20s, which is Bar 20 and Diamond 20. So, you have a lot of diversity in there, but there was also a lot of commonality with people wanting their government to work for them. And certainly learned, everyone has a different perception of what that government is and what you want that government to do for you. So that too was a good education curve for me to take into.
Well, it's been great having you on the board, and I know everyone wishes you the best, and whatever that next step is going to be. Recently there's been a bit of a controversy that involves the appointee to the Planning Commission that you made.
Right.
Kelly Wooster made a comment that has been controversial in a recent meeting. The general plan was being discussed.
Right.
And so I just wanted to give you an opportunity. Is there anything you can say about that comment, anything that you can explain, or is it inappropriate at this point for you to make a comment?
I've been asked by County Council not to make a comment, as all the board members and planning commissioners have. I will say this, is that Mr. Wooster did make an apology for his statement, and I do know that our board will be meeting to discuss this particular situation. So hopefully by the time this airs, we'll know a little bit more.
Okay, and so the board's going to handle this in the professional manner,
Yes.
Per County Council's guidance, and I'm sure everyone will be updated once that resolution.
And within the Brown Act, which is really important. So, a few of us just couldn't meet to talk about it. So it will be done within accordance of state law.
We'll circle back on that when that process is complete.
Fair enough.
Another controversial issue is the medical marijuana ordinance, which the board has been working very hard on. And many people seem to have radically different views on the way the county should move forward on this. And I'm hoping you'll educate me and the viewers about the history of marijuana in the county and where we are now.
Well, I'm not sure about the history, but I can tell you where we are now. I know when I come onto the board, there was a discussion about medical cannabis and, grows in Calaveras County and what was legal and what wasn't. not a lot of discussion at the board level about it. Actually, a year ago, April, there was some discussion at the board about it. To where we were talking about a potential ordinance. We had directed staff to come back with an ordinance of sorts. And it had been discussed in previous years, but not to the level that we were bringing it. During that April meeting, heard lots of information, but we were also hearing that the state was going to be doing something. They were working on laws to better regulate medical cannabis. And so at that time, our board agreed to not take action on a local ordinance, see what state law did. In October, Governor signed in 3 bills that related to medical cannabis, and each bill kind of intermingles. They don't stand alone. So you can't just read one bill thinking, this is it. So a very complicated, complex subject. We heard some presentations from our Rural County Association, how it was going to affect counties, not necessarily rural counties. And so we directed staff at that point to put together an ordinance for consideration. And in December, we met again as a board and gave further direction to staff. And in January, February, we had several meetings about it, putting together an ordinance. Basically, there was law out there that said if you didn't do something as a county or city by March 1st, either ban it or embrace local ordinance for it, it would be banned and the state would oversee whatever that might be. And so our board, our county, took the position to where we wanted to have some sort of local control. We were hearing from cannabis farmers that had been here and growing for quite some time, most within the legal framework that had been established prior to these new laws. And so that's where we've been working. I myself took a lot of opportunity to meet with cannabis growers, dispensaries, you might say everything related to cannabis, both the good, bad, and the ugly, and to be able to kind of craft an ordinance that fit Calaveras County. So that law went away for March 1 deadline. I should say the deadline went away. So that gave counties a little bit of breathing room. We didn't have to go for the urgency ordinance. We can now develop an ordinance through our normal channels. So the ordinance we have out there right now is for discussion, and we'll go through the Planning Commission process and back to the board for further review. But, in my opinion, there is still an urgency to it. Even though March 1 was the law that said do something or else, we have grow season upon us. And, that can start anywhere from April to June in this region of the county, or of California, you might say, because it's prime conditions for growing operations. And so, in some ways we have the urgency to do something now. And I don't know what that might be. It's possible to where we say, if you've been a legal grower prior to law, maybe register with the county so you're on the books and we know what we're working with. Because the word is out in the state of California that we're one of several counties that are looking at having a local ordinance. So you do have people who are from the outside, you say, might be looking in, whether they're buying property, want to set up a dispensary, distributor, whatever it might be. So I think it's really important that we act quickly to have something on the books so that we can say this is the direction we want to take this.
In your view, is this ordinance, should it be more narrow than what's currently allowed, more restrictive, or is this something that you'd like to see kind of opened up so it's kind of, you have much more freedom in what you can do?
Now it's kind of willy-nilly. There is no local ordinance to regulate it. It's what the state and voters passed in 96 with the medical cannabis, and then a few years later was saying, X amount for a grow. So that's the problem now. There is no structure. And what these 3 laws do is provide a structure where you will register locally. You'll have different classifications. Are you indoor grow, outdoor grow, the size of your grow? And with that, is this going to be an administrative use permit process, a conditional use permit process? So there'll be fees that people will pay up front to the county. Those fees in turn then can help regulate these ordinances, whether it's through code enforcement, law enforcement, however it might be regulated. That's something for us to determine. And the thing about it is then these folks have the blessing, you might say, from the county, and they go to the state and they have to apply for another permitting process. So there at the state level, they register with the Board of Equalization, Department of Consumer Affairs, Department of Food and Ag. They run their plans through the State Water Resource Board. So much more scrutiny at the state level, including background checks. So it's a multi-tiered level of permitting, you might say, for this. And from, now if you're a patient growing your 6 plants, you might not have the stringent regulations if you were going to grow an acre. It's no longer about you can grow 99 plants or 100 plants or 500 plants. It's more of what you can fit on a square footage, a footprint, you might say. Okay. And that's kind of what we're moving forward in our ordinances.
So it sounds like the state has given you a framework, and then the county can add additional regulation to that if they feel that it's warranted.
Yes.
So it's those additional regulations that are being discussed right now. What are you hearing from those who have grown marijuana in this county? How do they feel about this?
Well, what I've learned, it's much more of an industry in Calaveras County than I ever realized, and I think most people ever realized.
Explain that. What are we talking about?
Well, we've had cannabis farming in Calaveras County for a number of years. And it's been a very quiet, unregulated industry. And I have gone on about 20 cannabis farm tours, you might say, in Calaveras County. And so what I learn each time, most of the ones I am visiting are the ones who are helping develop ordinances to comply with state law. They're very involved locally. They're very involved at the state level. And so they want to be regulated because they've lived under the shadows. They've lived in fear of other things that they want to be able to comply with local ordinances and law and be a part of the solution, the process, to be able to make their livelihood here. I think if we can develop local ordinance, my hope is that we have some opportunity to regulate locally, to be able to charge accordingly, to pay for this kind of regulation, and hopefully the guys that are what I consider the bad guys or the guys that don't want to comply with law will find somewhere else to go. We are serious. You're going to follow these policies, this ordinance. You're going to pay accordingly, and we're going to have funds to support that. The next thing in line with that is we can also pass a tax. And again, this is not an industry that's taxed. So they utilize a lot of services that you and I are paying for. So now this industry will be taxed accordingly, and those funds can stay here in Calaveras County. And, of course, that has to go on the ballot. People have to approve that. But if it's going to be an industry here in Calaveras County, I think we should capture that particular revenue and opportunity to have the industry support our services or a portion of our services.
Couple thoughts. One is in talking with hardware store owners or owners of nurseries and things of that nature. You talked about the industry. There has been a huge boom to some of those businesses. So that's very beneficial. And then just to make a stark contrast, not too long ago, I read about someone allegedly trying to rip off a grow and then being gunned down and murders took place. And so, you have these big benefits, maybe some tax revenue coming in, and yet you also have this criminal component that is associated with this industry. And what I am wondering is, when everything was illegal and you weren't supposed to grow, we still had folks coming up here and growing illegally in our rural county. What is to stop that from continuing when they don't want to be regulated? They don't want to pay any of these taxes or fees. They can make more money if they just get away with it. How would the board and the sheriff's department deal with that? Well,
I think now, with the sheriff's department, it's hard to figure out who's legal and who's not. And they don't have the resources for that. They don't have the deputies for that. They don't have the financial resources to be able to kind of fight that. And so now it's like, what do we do? We know about that grow, and over there, is that cartel? Is that legal? Is that? And so pretty soon you get to the point where there's not enough resources to take care of what is going on. And so you hear the bad stuff, the real bad stuff. And so hopefully, again, with regulation, we're going to know who's on the up and up. And those guys are over here, and they're under a code compliance situation. And then now if calls are coming in to say, hey, I think my neighbor's growing, are they legal or not, or what's going on over there, or whatever, there'll be a database to know. These are the legal grows that are complying with ordinance, and these are not. And hopefully that will give law enforcement some better guidance about these are the guys we want to work on. These are the guys we don't want in Calaveras County. These are the guys that we're going to shut down.
Gosh, I mean, that just sounds like a dangerous situation, you know, having to walk up to a grow that, let's say, was illegal and ask for proof that they are legal. That's not anywhere I'd want to be. So that's a big challenge, certainly.
It is a big challenge.
What about the crime component? You know, if, let's say, you have a bunch of legal grows and someone wants to come and rip them off, you know, that's going to be an issue as well. Would the Sheriff's Department need more funding to almost protect the legal grows?
Well, I think so. And I think through ordinance and our permit process, you know, it's not a one-time permit fee. This is an ongoing permit fee. So it's going to be able to fund things like code enforcement and with law enforcement. So, yeah, there's going to be the need for more staffing. If we don't do anything, what happens? We don't have any additional staffing to go out there and take care of it. So, you know, if you say, okay, we're going to ban it all together, where's the money going to come from to enforce that? Because it's not happening now.
Right.
So
the other thing I was curious about is, my understanding is federally, marijuana is still a Schedule I drug, which conflicts with state policy.
Right.
Will that impact what's happening in our county? Is that a consideration in this process?
I think it's something to consider. I don't think that's going to be the big issue. You know, when the state passed these laws, and Governor Brown was, you know, signed them into law and fully supporting this. It's, I think, a recognition on the state level that this was quite a large industry here, and it was unregulated, and the state was missing out. So, you know, when I saw the state law where it's encompassing the Board of Equalization, so you get taxation, Department of Consumer Affairs, the Water Board, Food and Ag, now you're going to have regulation, and you're going to have permitting processes for the use of pesticides. You're going to have to apply for your State Water Resource Board license. So you're going to have some protection to the waterways and to the environment. So you have those things in place, and that's going to help, you know, this industry, and it's going to kind of weed out the bad guys. I think the bad guys will always be around in some capacity because it is in every industry. You know, I'm not, you know, totally convinced that, okay, you have all this great local legislation and state, and so the bad guy goes away. I mean, that's just not going to happen because it's in every industry we have.
So when are we going to have kind of the final ordinance in what's a good month or year?
Well, I'm hopeful that it's soon. Again, it's the board's direction was that the Planning Commission look at these ordinances, you know, more public process of people being able to comment one way or the other, take a look at it, redefine, massage here and there. But more importantly is that deadline now as we approach grow season. So I don't know if the urgency is going to come back before the board now because of that and say, okay, let's put something in place as we create maybe the long-term solution to this.
Okay. I have about 5 minutes left, and another key topic that I wanted to talk to you about was the sheriff.
Yes.
We had a very sad, untimely passing of Sheriff Gary Kuntz, and that left a void in that position. And am I correct that Captain Macedo has kind of filled in there?
Yeah, it's, you know, Gary Kuntz's administration had kind of a hierarchy chain of command, and so Captain Macedo is currently acting as sheriff in that capacity until the board is able to appoint somebody. We found through state law and election code, due to an untimely death of someone who's in office, in this case sheriff, that the board was appointed to be able to appoint a sheriff. It could not be something that could be an elected position at this time. And so we have asked the Attorney General's office to verify that. But meanwhile, we've started the process of recruitment. So when the board started up again in January, we directed Human Resources to to post the job, to seek out applicants, to encourage applicants. And so our direction is that we wanted somebody who was already a resident of Calaveras County. They could either be working within the Sheriff's Department or not, a registered voter, and of course meet the, kind of the requirements of sheriff with post-training and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so Human Resources accepted applications, went through kind of a paper process to make sure people qualified, and from there a list of candidates will go to an interview committee. We've asked for at least 3 sheriffs from other counties. Primarily rural counties was something, or maybe an adjoining county to us, who would conduct an interview of the candidates. We then asked that particular interview board to present up to 5 candidates to the Board of Supervisors. So we're in that process now. The candidates have not been through that official interview process with the panel. It'll come before the board, I would think, in the next 30 to 45 days. And in that process will be a public review process, you might say. We're soliciting questions from the public, and we will look at those questions to make sure they meet the labor law kinds of things we need to do there, and then be able to have our interview process and a public open meeting of the Board of Supervisors. And from there, hopefully we select one person to become our sheriff.
And how long would that person be sheriff until the next election?
They would fulfill the term of Sheriff Kuntz's term. So basically another 3 years. He would be entering his second year.
So that's quite a long time, yes, because he was so early in his term. So this is a big decision for the board.
It is, and we can't hold a special election. We can't tie it into the election in June or in November. State law goes way back to like the 1900s. Election code is very specific. So we have our marching orders. The Board of Supervisors is to appoint the next sheriff until the next election cycle for sheriff.
And do we have some candidates from within the Sheriff's Department who've come forward?
I hear of that. I, as a board member, have kind of removed myself as to who's who and what's what and who's applied. So I really want the process to work, and I don't want to be influential one way or the other. So when they come before me, I can say, it's a fresh face to me.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much for joining me on the show and all the great information. I wish you all the best in your future.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and I hope you join me next time.